Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Torah of the Messiah. And in today's episode, I really want to talk about a topic that is rather cancerous in the body of Messiah. In fact, cancerous also in the context of it's one of the reasons for leprosy. And one thing I would encourage everyone to do, because me and my brother John Rowan actually go into deep understanding on this concept that I'm about to be speaking on today in our Roundtable, under Roundtable Talks playlist on my YouTube. We did What is Leprosy Part 1 and What is Leprosy Part 2, as this is one of the three things that Jesus commanded his disciples to do: cast out devils, heal the sick, and cleanse the lepers. And we talked about leprosy in great depth and the causes for leprosy. And one of the causes of leprosy is slander. And this is why I say it's cancerous. It spreads like a wildfire. It brings hardships upon our lives, like sicknesses and this, that, or the other, without realizing. But also really understanding from a biblical perspective what slander or gossip or peddling really is. And as always, the Torah of the Messiah, what does the Messiah have to say about these concepts? How do we walk this out to where we don't walk in slander? What is considered slander or peddling according to Messiah's standards? Messiah Yeshua, Jesus, takes the Torah of Moses and he interprets it in such a way. He never nullifies it or speaks down on it, but he takes each concept and he says, let me tell you what this looks like. As it says in the book of John, he says, a new commandment I give to you, in English, love each other as I have loved you. He doesn't give a new commandment. What he gives is a chidush in Hebrew. A mitzvah charashah is like a chidush. It's a new interpretation of the commandment that was already given. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The difference is he's simply interpreting it as loving your neighbor is according to what I've done for you, the standard that I've left you. And so this is what Jesus also does with a passage in Leviticus 19, verse 14 and verse 16, when it comes to slandering people. And he actually tells us how to interpret these things. And this is such an important concept, whether you're a believer, unbeliever. Slander is huge. It can come so quickly and easily. We can fall into it and fall guilty of it all the time. I'm being transparent before you. It is so easily, even for me, as somebody who fears the Lord and loves him so greatly, to just, boom, you fell into something, and I cannot tell you how many times I go to the Lord after a conversation and I go, Father, did I just slander? Did I just spread someone's business or something that I wasn't supposed to? Was that crossing the line, something that I did? Father, if it was, please forgive me. I repent. Please cleanse me of that. Please show me the way of purity and righteousness on my tongue, that I may represent you well and that I would only speak blessing about your people, and this, that, or the other. So I want to go into this because I really believe it's super practical. I believe it's super important, and we're going to define it. We're not going to say, what does Merriam-Webster say about slander? We're going to go to the biblical text, and we're going to see what the Torah of the Messiah has to say about this. So in Leviticus chapter 19, we're going to read two verses, verse 14 and verse 16. I'll start with the former. In verse 14 it says, Lo tekalel cheresh, v'lifnei iver lo titen michshol, v'yareta me'elohecha ani Yahweh. It says here in verse 14, you shall not curse the deaf, and you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind. When we study Torah, we have to understand it through spiritual lenses. It's not the literal deaf, although you can use the deaf as a parable, which is what is being used here. When it says you shall not curse the deaf, it's meaning somebody who cannot hear, the deaf. So what it's saying is somebody who is not here, they're over there, when you talk behind their back where they don't know that you're doing it, especially in a negative way, tekalel, to curse or to take lightly. So it's a negative connotation that you're saying about somebody that's not in their presence. They have no idea this is how you feel and what you're saying behind their back. This is what he's saying. You are cursing the deaf. You shall not go and curse somebody behind their back or speak about somebody behind their back in a negative way. because they're deaf to it. They have no idea. It would be as if a deaf person was sitting here and you could just be saying something and he would have no idea. That's what the text is saying. You shall not curse the deaf. Now here's the thing. The deaf means that they would have no idea that this is what you're saying. Jesus, in the New Testament, behind the backs of the Pharisees, by the way, he says, behind the backs of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, he tells his disciples, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Beware of their hypocrisy. They're hypocrites. He says this behind their back. So is this Jesus cursing the deaf? Talking lightly about the deaf? Tikalel comes from the word kalal. It means to take someone lightly. Is this him doing this to the deaf? No. Jesus says in John 18, verse 20, he says, everything that I have spoken, I have done openly before your faces. In fact, in Matthew 23, he goes on a rant against the scribes and the Pharisees, and he calls them hypocrites over and over and over again. He says it to their face. So it's not that he's just saying it behind their back, which, by the way, in context, he's doing it to protect his disciples. He's trying to warn them, to protect them as his sheep. But nevertheless, he doesn't just do that behind their back. Jesus' heart is all about restoration. Jesus' heart is not, let me try and protect you from these Pharisees without trying to go and save them first. Let me go and try and save them from what I'm trying to protect you from. That's the heart of the Messiah. So the Messiah not only tells them this, but it's also because he's already told the Pharisees and the scribes, hey, you're being a hypocrite. You need to repent. It's because he cares about the Pharisees. He cares about the scribes. He didn't curse the deaf or take lightly the deaf. What he said to them behind their back is the same thing that he said in their presence, to where what he's saying behind their back is no secret of how he feels. He's already said this openly. So whenever we have an issue with somebody, we need to not go behind their back and tell this person and this person and this person. We need to go to those people, as Jesus says in Matthew 5, if you have a problem with your brother or your brother has a problem with you, you need to go to that person. So it's not like they're deaf, but they know exactly how you feel. Otherwise, don't say anything at all. Going and telling this person is doing nothing. If you're going to tell this person, make sure you go and tell this person straight to their face. You're not doing anything in the secret, anything in the dark, but openly before all men. Like I said, if you're not going to do that, then just keep it to yourself if you feel a certain way. Don't go behind someone's back and curse the deaf. And don't place a stumbling block before the blind. That's what the same verse says. What it means is somebody who does not know better. This is why Jesus says in Matthew 15, I believe it is, verse 14, I think. It says, the blind lead the blind into a ditch. Both of them are people that are trying to follow the Lord. But if there is a teacher that's leading people who don't know better, right? They're disciples. They're looking for, the teachings from that pastor or teacher or apostle or prophet or evangelist. If you teach them wrong, you're now placing a stumbling block before the blind because they can't see. They're expecting you to lead them. Just like a blind person, lead me where I need to go. They're saying you're supposed to be the spiritual guide, and you are placing a stumbling block before the blind. But what's the antidote? What's the medicine? The verse says, you shall not curse the deaf, and you shall not place a stumbling block before the blind. It says, V'yareta me'elohecha ani Yahweh. But you shall fear the Lord. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord, is what the text says. Meaning, the fear of the Lord is actually the medicine to these things. Me and John, I think, talk about it on our leprosy video where we say the fear of the Lord literally makes slander so uncomfortable. There is no way you can do it. And if you do it, you will confess it and repent. Because the fear of God within you makes sin uncomfortable. It makes slander uncomfortable. It causes you to say, Father, I've fallen short. I'm so sorry. Please cleanse me of this. I don't want to do this anymore. The fear of the Lord is the answer to these two things. So if you have a problem with somebody, go and take care of it to their face. Don't go behind their back and say something. And if it's behind their back, like Jesus did this as well, behind the backs of the Pharisees, he did this with his disciples in private. But it's because he did all of these things openly. There's nothing he's telling his disciples about the Pharisees that he hasn't already told them to their face. There's nothing deaf about the Pharisees as far as Yeshua's point of view about them. Yeshua has told them openly, in front of everybody, at the temple. There's no secrets. I wonder how Jesus feels about us. If the disciples or somebody heard, hey, Jesus said behind y'all's backs that y'all were hypocrites, they would say, yeah, he told us the same thing. We already knew that's how he felt about us. But also, Jesus wasn't just trying to go around and talk about these people. He was doing it out of a shepherd's heart to protect his people from falling into the pits that the Pharisees and the scribes were not only digging, but themselves falling into. Now, I want to also jump into verse 16, because this is a huge one that falls under this whole umbrella of slander and gossip. It says, Lo telech rachil ba'amecha, lo ta'amod al dam reyecha ani Yahweh. It says, you shall not go as a talebearer or as a peddler, a rachil, among your people. The word rachil comes from the word rachal, or a rochel, or rechulah, which is literally, in Hebrew, a peddler or a merchant. What a merchant or a peddler does is you go and purchase goods and merchandise from this person, and you go and sell it to this person. What it's saying is, don't take someone's business that they tell you here and go sell their business here. You just go and you tell this person's business to this person. You're just going and passing things on. You need to be somebody who is willing to... You're not going and sharing people's business. You're a trustworthy friend that really cares about the person that's telling you something. They might be confiding in you about something or whatever it is. But if they're telling business to you, don't go and just sell the information off. It's a form of slander. It's a form of gossip. And actually it can fall under a form of witchcraft. It's cursing people. And it's sharing their business when you should be able to be entrusted with such things. So when you take these two concepts, it becomes very, very simple. Cursing the deaf behind their back, people that can't hear, where it's like, hey, they really don't know how I feel about them. Go and take care of your business. Or like I said, don't say anything at all. I've actually had to encounter this on every end. The only reason I can teach on this is because I've failed at all these things. Many pastors or preachers or teachers may not want to admit it, but I've failed at these things. I have slandered before, and I have gossiped before. I have done things out of order before. I've had to repent for all these things, and it's something that I have to daily, continually reflect with the Lord to make sure that I'm walking in uprightness with Him in the footsteps of the Messiah. But it's these two passages that can bring leprosy upon us, where it can bring punishment upon us, it can bring sickness, it can bring isolation, it can bring evil upon our tents. If we have tents of wickedness, and it's not upright in the light before the Lord, walking in the ways of the Messiah, it can be like a cancer. And like I said, when it comes to slander, when it comes to spreading people's business, and when it comes to leading the blind into a ditch and putting a stumbling block before them, not fearing the Lord, not taking positions of power with great reverence and responsibility, these are issues that are rampant. And we need to be very careful with our tongues, and we need to be able to be transparent, not only before the Lord, but before other people. There will be teachers, pastors, rabbis, dear brothers and sisters in the faith, where we will literally talk and say, hey, would you consider what was just said, whether it was from me or somebody else, would you consider that slander? Do I need to repent? You know, you're just very transparent and open. You can never be too open and transparent and reflecting and examining of your life. It is a wonderful thing. In fact, Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, he says, examine yourselves to know whether or not you're in the faith. Meaning, your actions need to abide in the faith walk of the Messiah. Continually examine yourself and have people around you that are going to walk with you alongside that examination, not in a critical, judgmental, condemning way, but in a way that keeps people accountable and able to raise you up to walk deeper with the Messiah, holding us to the standard to reflect His light and to honor Him in a way with our tongues, with our actions, and with everything that we do.